Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And every weekday, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. And today, I'm really looking forward to this conversation for a few reasons, which I'll explain here in a few minutes. But I am joined by Brad Crawford. He's just up the road from me. Actually, I'm in Indianapolis and Brad's up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Get your atlas out and you can understand that geography here, that Indiana geography. But Brad is the CEO of Ambassador Supply and also the CEO of Rival Holdings. We'll talk about that. One of the reasons I'm excited is because a couple of days ago I had KP Reddy, who's the CEO of Shadow Partners and Shadow Ventures. KP and I talked about VC, venture capital, versus corporate VC or CVC. Yes. And today, this is sort of a great follow-up to that conversation. So, Brad, thanks for joining me today. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Appreciate the invite, Jeff. Thank you. Looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're not far apart. I should have just driven up a couple of hours, and we could have just done this live from your office. That would have been the thing to do. But and so I've got some knowledge, right? We shadow work together with Ambassador, et cetera. So, but the opportunity to follow up that conversation with KP the other day and focus on basically the CVC side, the corporate VC side. So, you took over as a CEO of Ambassador Supply several years ago, and part of what you've been doing is looking at innovation, looking at investment. And so you're fully now looking at least on the CVC side. Yeah. Tell me why, as you look at a company like Ambassador, and you're going to have to give a little bit of background, I guess, in order to really understand this, but tell me why, when you take a family-owned company and you look at diversification and you start looking at innovation, why do you start to do that, and where does the venture side come into the equation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one I don't know that I can succinctly answer.
That's fine.
But Ambassador Supply, which was part of a larger organization, it's really a family office private equity firm, Ambassador Enterprises. The owner has the desire for us to be a 100-year legacy-based company. So when you try to step back and look at what's going to happen in 1 year, let alone 10 years or 100 years, that looks, and the forces that act upon you look totally different. So trying to set a strategy, even though your executable strategy might be for 3 years out, or your framework might be for 3 years out, 5 years out, trying to steward somebody's resources towards a long-term 100-year run, which is what they desire, it forces you to think differently. And for us, what does this industry look like 15, 20 years from now, or 50 to 100 years from now? Change has to occur. And my background, I came from advanced manufacturing in the automotive and electronics industry. So I'm not an engineer. I have a business administration degree, but I kind of have that mindset of efficiency and continuous improvement. So the worlds kind of merged, bringing my past experience together with the construction and building industry, the built worlds. And when you see where it has evolved over the last 50, 60 years, it hasn't evolved as the rest of the world or industries have evolved. And there are many reasons why that has happened that way. And you have to be respectful of why it hasn't and what the context is. And then how do we apply the macro forces and, the need for affordable housing and the need for additional housing or additional structures in general. Those are two forces that aren't necessarily moving in the same direction. So something has to change. And we know we're not going to change the world. Our desire is not to change the world, but our desire is to make sure that we have a company that can support its employees for the next 50 to 100 years and be agile enough to adopt these disruptive technologies or iterative disruptive technologies that are coming down the pipeline, and it is happening. So for us, I'm giving you a long-winded elevator speech, but for us, we try to figure out what does the horizon look like and who can we partner with. And we looked at several VC funds to do so. And we felt we could hire an individual to go out and look and hunt, but it made more sense for us to hire or join or fund a VC partner that was like-minded. And we got it down to 3 or 4 funds, and we chose Shadow. And through that process and through that knowledge transfer, we have also looked at not only becoming a fund partner for the VC, but also what are we doing as a corporate VC alongside them to help impact some of these investments or do some things that maybe doesn't fit the VC mindset, but does fit the corporate VC mindset. And I think there is a difference.
Yeah. And KP, I think when we talked, I think it was Monday of this week, but when we talked, he laid out how he saw the difference in the mindsets of the VC versus the CVC. And I think all of that makes sense. And what's really interesting to me about what you were just talking about was starting from the point of view of wanting to have a legacy, 100-year company, one that supports your employees for 50 to 100 years, et cetera. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in this idea of innovation and change and disruption and this idea that everything is new, but you're actually saying, yeah, everything needs to be new, everything needs to change in order for us to survive, in order for us to build this legacy. And I think for a lot of people that's probably not something that was top of mind. I didn't think about that in terms of the longevity of our business versus how do I compete today, tomorrow, next week, next quarter, next year?
Yeah, I think that, so a couple points there. I think you have to respect the history of, construction's millennia old, right? But how do you respect? There's a reason why it got to where it got to today. And with a lot of the challenges that have been created, there also have been a lot of successes. So you need to respect the generations prior to you and learn from them and realize that the only constant is change in this world. So how do we then look towards the future and what other industries that may not be doing what we're doing, but we can learn from them, whether it's the automotive industry, whether it's the aerospace industry, whether it's the cruise liner construction industry or technology. What does that look like? What can we glean from their successes, their failures to help us down our path? And try to balance that with the human aspect, the cultural aspect of what we're doing, which is our employees, our communities that our employees live and work in. We need to try to help them adapt for an ever-changing environment. Because I think what's coming to an inflection point to where you're going to have several of these technologies come together and things are going to change rapidly. And it's going to appear to the outside world that it's overnight, but it's been 20, 30 years in the making to lead to this. So, from our perspective, we have to look at that horizon. And again, how far out, I don't know, but we have to look at it from what can we do today to set ourselves up for that point tomorrow. And as a corporate VC, we're going to look at, and we're going to narrow down our scope and take a look at multiple offerings to try to get us to the same point in time. And they might have completely different approaches, but we want to look at all to keep our options open because, again, we have our legacy-based companies which are performing well in today's market and addressing today's problems. So I have the luxury of stepping out of I still get involved in the day-to-days, but I have the luxury to step out and look up and out and see what's coming. And for us, the challenge is how do we inject this great opportunity with these advancements into these legacy companies without breaking them? And we're working through that today.
Yeah. When I know you have a lot of business experience, even beyond, Ambassador and Rival. So when you think of where you are now and what you're doing now in the corporate VC realm, as a way to as a vehicle for building and
Right.
sustaining a legacy company. What do you see as the biggest difference between that attitude, that outlook, even the logistics of what you're doing versus another company across town that may have a similar product base, that may have a similar customer base, et cetera, but they aren't focusing on the CVC. They may be saying, "Hey, we want to build a legacy company as well," but they're going about it differently than you are. You're going about it differently than they are. What do you see? Based on all of your experience, what's the biggest difference between those two outlooks?
Intentionality, honestly, I
Mm.
think. So we're very intentional about taking a step back, looking around and listening, what are our options, and saying, how can we do it better? A lot of what we see in the industry is a lot of people are working in their business every day and not, they don't have the ability to take a step back and work on their business.
Yep.
And we've been blessed enough that we've been able to hire some really good people to do so. I think we're probably all moving in the same direction the next 5, 10, 15 years. I'm hoping, and we're all going to have some sort of um, turmoil, some sort of disruption in our daily activities as these technologies come in. I don't think it's a one size fits all, or we're going to swallow this magic pill that cures all of our ills at that time. We'll still have challenges. I just hope we're better prepared, whether that's better margins long term, whether that's, we can invest in our people at a higher level because we have savings from some efficiencies in
Mm.
other places that will help us adapt more smoothly than what the rest of the industry that doesn't look ahead, if you will, in the same way we do. Um, they're going to have to pivot pretty quickly,
Mm.
or maybe accept a place or a role in the industry that's not optimal for them. So maybe that looks like less upside growth. Maybe that looks like less geographic, whatever that looks like. Hopefully, we're better prepared and better suited to tackle those challenges than someone that's not. Not saying that are they right and we're wrong, or we're right and they're wrong. I don't know. I think it's just a different approach. So
Sure.
we're trying to get out in front of it as best we can.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I know that you are headed to Shadow Summit later this year. If you're watching this and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, Shadow Summit. This will be the 7th annual Shadow Summit. It's our own conference. We call it a summit because that's what it is. It's not a conference where we're going to gain continuing education units. It is a place for a small number, 200 tickets max, for a small number of people to get together, the best thinkers, the best innovators in the built environment, to talk about, and we like to think, set an agenda
Mhm.
for what's going to happen, what's going to be invested in, what's going to be innovated for the built environment through the rest of the year, looking at 24, looking at 25. So Brad, I know you're going to be at Shadow Summit. What do you hope to find there? What do you hope that some of the discussions will center around when we all get to Atlanta in October?
Selfishly, industrialized construction, or an aspect
Mhm.
of industrialized construction. Um, I just think the advances in technology, continuing to update ourselves, because what the bar was in 2022 looks completely different than what the bar is just a year later in 2023. If you look at just advancements with AI and Chat GPT, again, overnight success that was 20 years in the making, right? But
Yep.
it was released and we saw that. So I think just networking and talking with like-minded individuals that are trying to solve the same problem, but maybe through a different lens, but the same problem. Just thought sharing. Having updates from those that focus on this every single day in terms of the technology aspect. Also, I found it extremely helpful hearing from the companies that are launching. What do they need and how do they see the world? Because
Mm.
this is kind of central to all that we do, Jeff, is whether we're purchasing a business or whether we're trying to partner in technologies. If I understand the problems you're trying to solve and I share with you the problems that I'm trying to solve and or the obstacles that I have to try to help address your problems, if you understand where I'm coming from, we're going to get to that end point much faster because we're all cards are on the table. So if I understand from their perspective the limitations that they have as a startup, and they understand the problems I'm trying to solve or what I'm trying to achieve, I think hearing those things, we can address the market at a much faster pace, as opposed to we're simply funding somebody and they're often doing it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I brought this book up sometime in one of these conversations in the last several days. I find myself bringing it up more than more. It was one of my favorite reads of 2022. It's called Where Do Good Ideas Come From? The Natural History of Innovation, I think is the subtitle. Stephen Johnson, I believe, is the author, but he talks about near adjacencies, and he talks about it. He explains essentially what you just described, and you said something earlier where we see these things that we see. Oh, look at that huge innovation, this groundbreaking things, and we can look at it as an overnight success, 20 years in the making, But as he describes it in the book, he says, most of these big innovations, these groundbreaking things that we see, are just small iterations from a near adjacency. It's something that's been happening and just made a leap over to somewhere else. And what you just described about the summit and the reason that you need to have the conversations that you have, I think fits exactly into that scenario.
I appreciate that. I'm going to read that or listen to it. I don't read it. I'll listen to it.
I am with you. I burn Audible credits like they're kindling, man. I keep upping my plan and then keep buying more, but I listen to them as well. Where do good ideas come from? Brad, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all these thoughts and your outlook with us. And I'm looking forward to getting together with you before then, but in Atlanta for Shadow Summit. I'll be up in Ball State, or I'll be up at Ball State in Muncie in a couple of weeks. I'll just bump up to
come on up
to Fort Wayne when I'm up there. Yeah, absolutely. If you're watching this right now or listening to this and you want to know more about Shadow Summit, then go to shadowsummit.com. It's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now. And Brad, if they want to know more about what you're working on, they want to know more about Rival, and they want to know more about Ambassador, where should they go?
Best place is our website, rival.re, as in real estate, rival.re, and ambassadorsupply.com. The other affiliate is Via Developments, so viadevelopments.com. So those are the kind of the three, but Rival can take you to both of those. It shows a lot of our investments through Shadow as well as independently, and reach out to me. As always, my contact info is on the website. I love to talk to like-minded people.
Right on. Love it. So the URL for Rival is in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now, rival.re. Go check it out, connect with Brad, and join us in Atlanta, October 24th through 26th for Shadow Summit. Go to shadowsummit.com, and there's a button. Like I said, this is a purposefully intimate affair. Only 200 seats in the auditorium, and it really is meant to be a summit. It's a place where we talk about issues and try to find solutions and set an agenda as we move forward. So there's a button to apply at the top of the page at shadowsummit.com. Join Brad there, join me. You heard from KP Reddy earlier this week. We'll all be there, and we'll be having discussions just like this one that Brad and I have been having for the last almost 20 minutes now. We're getting to the into the realm of shadow medium instead of shadow short at this point. But we'll go deeper. We go deep into the weeds on conversations just like this. So join us. Go to shadowsummit.com for more info, and we'll see you down there in Atlanta. This is Brad Crawford, is the CEO of both Ambassador Supply and Rival Holdings. And Brad, thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation.
Likewise. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks. And for all of you out there, I'll be back again tomorrow with another Shadow Short. We'll see you then. Thanks, everybody. All right. Welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And every weekday, I bring to you an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation in the built environment. And today is no different. I'm going to have a Shadow Short conversation with Bill Boynes. He is a practice leader at Shadow Partners. And I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation because we talk a lot about innovation. We talk a lot about change, but we almost never talk about managing that change or how that change affects the people that are involved. So, Bill and I are going to talk about change management today. So, Bill, welcome. Thanks for doing this. I'm glad you're here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And I'm glad with that introduction, you nailed exactly the point I wanted to make. And that is, yeah, we're an innovation company and everyone talks about innovation. And that's great. And we need to be doing that. But I mean, I've been in projects all my life, and most projects are some way, somehow around innovation. And we always shrift the change management part of it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we were talking before we went live a couple of weeks ago. We just sort of coincidentally ended up with a theme of talking about the people in innovation, and that those conversations usually end up being about how do we create a culture of innovation. Um, hey, by the way, AI and these other innovative things are tools, and they're tools that are supposed to benefit our people. We usually approach it in that sort of direction. But at the end of the day, all of this, whether it is a new AI tool or a BIM tool or a new project management software, whatever it is, whatever these tools are, they are impacting our
yes.
people, and they mean that, hey, I've got to learn something new or I've got to do something new. So what are, when you come
Yeah.
in your consulting, you're advising one of our partners, a client of ours. What's the first thing that you look for when we're trying to get our heads wrapped around what's a change management strategy
Yeah.
for this organization?
Well, I'll give you just something funny. When you walk in to do any of these things, right? You talk about innovation, you talk about programs, and all that good stuff. And I mean, when I do that, the first thing I talk about is what it is that we're trying to accomplish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing I say is, okay, so what about change management? And inevitably, they go right to, oh, yeah, we have a committee that's set up and we'll make the plan for how we're going to go ahead and take one system out, put another system in, or bring this system in. We have that under control. I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Right? So that's actually one of, I think, the biggest issues out there is that when you say change management to someone, they actually think about just the physical change within the organization, putting right things into the
Right.
technology stack. No, we're talking about the psychology of change, right? And then that's how I drive the conversation, because as soon as you say that, I almost wish that's what we called it, it starts to click for people, right? Because they get it. They understand that their people are going to be apprehensive. We're all apprehensive around change, right? And all change management wants to do, as both the art and science of it, is to make sure that the organization, through its people, are prepared for that change, right?
Mm.
So that is the converse. Literally, I just gave you the conversation I have, right? Whenever I walk in to talk to someone about it, right? Get them to switch their mindset to understand that we're talking about the psychology of change, and then everything starts to roll from there.
What's something that, and I love that, the psychology of change, because it's, as humans, we're pretty resistant to change, most of us.
Yeah.
Um, what's something that you see in the most successful organizations? And I guess there's probably a better way to say that. The organizations that handle change management the best. What are some of best practices that you see,
Sure.
or an indicator when you walk in, you go, okay, this is going to be okay.
All right.
What are you looking for?
So it's going to sound a little weird, right? The first indicator for me is actually the answer to a question. And again, it's one of the first things once I get them to understand what we're talking about with change management, I ask them to describe their culture. Okay. And if I get a pat answer, right, I know we have an issue. right?
Mm.
But if I can get someone who can really delve in and say, oh, I'm glad you asked that question, because we focus a lot on making sure we build the right culture. It goes throughout our entire organization, from the time we're doing acquisition of human resources all the way through to everything that we do, right? So if you have a company that is in step with exactly what their culture is, that is a huge indicator of how successful we're going to be with change management. Because again, it's the psychology of change. So if you understand who your people are and you focus on building a culture to help support those people, then as we start working through the change management principles, it's going to be a much easier conversation, right? Because you know who your folks are and you know the things that they're going to need to be prepared for the change.
Yeah.
That is the biggest indicator.
That makes a lot of sense. And, we're not throwing anybody under the bus here, but, the fact of the matter is there are organizations that are not ready. They're not prepared. They need help. So let's flip the question around then. If I'm a CEO or a COO, and, we're having these conversations about change, about new tools, about, whatever change means in our context here. So I'm the CEO or COO or whoever's looking out at this. What are some red flags that I'm looking for that tell me, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I need to bring somebody in to help us with change management, because I'm not sure, we've got, like you said earlier, we've got the tech stack figured out. We've got we've got the tools figured out, but I'm not sure our people are ready. Or we have figured this out, so it's going to be the smoothest transition. What am I looking for that tells me, hey, I need to call Bill?
That's right. Well, the real answer, Jeff, is you always have to call Bill. Always.
Got it.
Right? Think of it like this. I used to joke around about this. Everyone, because I do a lot of working out. You and I've talked about it. I work out a lot. And I try to tell anyone who gets into starting to work out, hey, everyone will do well if they go with the trainer, right? Even if you don't think you need a trainer, right? You should always go with the trainer, because they're going to be able to take that step back, right? And look at what's going on holistically with you, where you may get stuck with the individual trees. They'll be able to see the forest, right? So I think the right approach is that a CEO, when they start talking about doing anything, right? And so since we always talk about innovation, they've come up with an innovation that they want to bring within their organization. They have to ask the question about change management, right? And listen, there are some principles. So let's talk about some of the red flags you mentioned. If you can't identify the right champions within your organization that are strong enough, right, and well respected enough within the organization to help drive that through, you immediately know you have a problem, right? Because that's where it starts, right? And so this is where the CEO has to look in the mirror, right? Because it has to start with them. If they are, if they don't have the time, right, to help drive this innovation, and they really can't identify a leader to do it, then they definitely need to bring someone like me in, right? But as I said, I actually believe that anytime that you do something like this, you need to bring in that outside expert, even if it's just for a one-day conversation, right? Because so just real quick, and the gray hair, right? So way back in the day, what we used to do whenever we would have projects is that we would set aside, as part of our kickoff, a 2-hour session just to talk about change management. So even if it's at just that level where you're about to do an innovation program, you bring someone in just to talk generically. Hey, this is what change management looks like. This is what you should be thinking about. And if any of those, if you don't understand any of those things, right, or you have these holes in your organization, let's make sure that we include change management as a more holistic portion of the program.
Yeah, I understand this is an incredibly broad question, but what does change management look like?
It is a broad question.
Yeah.
Right? So if you recall a little bit earlier, I said something about change management being an art and a science, right? And I used to always joke around that when someone tells you that what they do is an art and a science, it's because it's not really defined. But in this case, that's not really true, right? There is definitely a science to change management. So what does that look like broadly, right? It is making sure that the organization is prepared for whatever change it is that you're doing. Okay, and let's not get into what that change might be. Let's just talk about all changes. And so there's some blocking and tackling that you will always do if you're thinking through change management, right? You clearly identify what it is that the organization is trying to get out of the change. Okay, you have a clear message and a strategy to get that communication out, like get that messaging out around the change. You identify the people within the organization that are going to help drive the change, down through and make sure it's pervasive throughout either the entire organization or whatever part of the organization is doing a change. Okay, that's what it looks like. Now, doesn't that sound very easy? Right? So there's a lot of pieces that are involved. I mean, messaging, Jeff, you're a messenger, right? So you know all the detail that goes behind messaging. Folks, because I've been on some of these shorts and you make it seem very easy, right? But as we discussed, messaging in and of itself is not something that happens. There's an art to it as well as a science, right? So it's the same thing with change management. So generically, that's what change management looks like, right? I have a work stream that is truly focused on making sure that whatever change I'm doing is going to be adopted by the organization, right? But there's a lot of pieces that are involved with it. And it really is driven by the culture of the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that to me is a really interesting point, because we've had conversations. I've had conversations before, especially with people on the tech side, so maybe chief technology officer or information officer, talking about basically digital transformation, right? And the fact that whatever software they're using, let's just say it's Revit, if they're using BIM, if it's an architecture or engineering firm, and they know that company-wide they're using Revit to 10% of its capability, right? That might even be a high number. And so they look at digital transformation and they say, okay, well, if we were to squeeze another 2 or 3 or 5% out, right, to 10 to 15%, then that's a huge change. That's a huge efficiency boost potentially for us. But there's always that fear, when we bring in this new widget, we bring in this new software or whatever. Is it actually going to be adopted? Are we going to adapt to it? Are we actually going to bring this into our workflow? And what I just heard you say was addressing some of that fear. Whatever this change is,
yes,
is it actually going to take hold inside this organization? Because we're taking a big risk. We're making a huge investment into this. And as the CEO, I cannot afford for this change not to take hold in this organization.
Yeah, and you brought up something, you implied something that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about, and that is, so this whole conversation has been driven towards, I know I'm going to make a change, right? So let's make sure that we do change management within it. But change management can be just as effective when you go into an organization and they have done a change that did not work. Doesn't mean that they should throw their hands up, right? Because we can still go through and apply change management principles to increase the level of adoption of any particular innovation within a company, okay? Because again, as we talked about, it is really about getting people in the mindset of understanding what that change is, how it's going to make their lives better, and then get them to actually use it, right? So you can do that with something that's already in place. It's not always just about the innovation program that starts from scratch, right? You can come in on the back end. You don't want to do that, right? Because right? So let's be clear. But you can use change management principles to increase what is, the usage or adoption of something within your organization.
Well, is there something at the opposite end of the spectrum Is there change management applied before we decide what the change is?
Well, so yes, right? Because
Okay.
again, um, there's some, since you and I are talking sports, that's why I have blocking and tackling in my head. But there's some blocking and tackling that you should be prepared to do no matter what, right? Because listen, let's not kid ourselves. Every organization is going to go through change at one time or the other, right? So there's just some pieces, the science part of change management, right? Making sure that you understand exactly how you do training within your organization, right? Because training is a big part of change management. Most, especially public companies, do a great job of communicating outside, to people outside of their organization. Make sure you have a communication strategy internally, right? Even before you do a change. I mean, that can be something as simple as a newsletter that goes out to your people on a regular basis, right? Because then that becomes, right, an avenue for you to communicate a change. So those are some examples of things that you can do even before you even start talking about change, right? It's back to, I'll try to sum it up. Anything that you do in and around the care and feeding of your people probably is going to go into change management. So,
Yeah, that's. I think that paints a really clear picture. Yeah, I like the way you put that, and that's going back to, as I mentioned before, we talked about before we went live, that week of talking about cultures of innovation and the people and everything else. It's none of this innovation matters,
right,
right?
that's right. That's
If
right.
if
Mm-hmm.
if it's not for our people, if it's not, if we're not considering the impact and everything that our people, our customers, our users, there's a whole spectrum of it here, um,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously there's a huge spectrum as you're laying it out here to change management. This has been a fascinating conversation, Bill, and of course we could keep going
Oh, we can go on and
for a long time. Yeah, yeah. So if you're watching or listening to this now and you say, "Hey, I want to know more. I want to hear more about this." First of all, Bill will be back. Bill is a practice leader at Shadow Partners, and I will rope him into more of these conversations so that you'll get more. So don't worry about that. But also, if you don't know about this now, if you haven't heard, maybe this is the first time you've stumbled upon Shadow Shorts. Later this year in October, the 24th through the 26th, opening reception is on the Tuesday. I think that's right, Tuesday, the 24th. And then the 25th and 26th is the seventh annual Shadow Summit. Bill will be there. I will be there. A lot of the people that you see on these Shadow Shorts, they will be there. And we will get into conversations about change management. We will get into conversations about the tech stacks, about the AIs, the machine learnings, and industrialized construction. Shadow Summit is really about setting the agenda for everything that we're going to focus on. And when I say we, it's people that are shaping the built environment: architecture firms, engineering firms, construction firms, real estate developers, all of the startups and the tech people that are supporting and driving that change. Shadow Summit is about setting the agenda for the work and the conversations for 2024. So I'd encourage you to go to shadowsummit.com, find out more about the summit, more about the event. If it's something that interests you, you can do one of two things or both. You can say, "Hey, I want to sponsor this. I see a topic here that's really important to my business. I need to be identified with this. I want to sponsor Shadow Summit." Be happy to talk about that. Um, Buy a ticket and attend. Those tickets are going very quickly. There's an application process. The button is at the top of the page there at shadowsummit.com. The URL is in the bottom left corner of your screen right now. Join me, join Bill there, join KP Reddy, our CEO, and the rest of the Shadow team. And like I said, many of the guests that have and will appear on Shadow Shorts here as we keep doing this every day. I'll be back again tomorrow with another conversation about innovation for the built environment. So in the meantime, Bill, thanks a lot for this conversation. It's been a
Absolutely.
great one.
Thanks for having me,
Glad,
Jeff.
absolutely glad you're here. And for those of you that are watching this live or, in some time shifted manner, we appreciate you. We'll be back tomorrow and we'll talk more about innovation for the built environment. Thanks. See you tomorrow.